Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked where I climb the Online Series 12 ladder and provide live commentary as I go. In the last episode, we kicked off the brand new ranked season with a really fun team featuring Assault vs Reshiram. This was built by a player called TSL Tank, who's one of my favorite team builders in Sword and Shield, and he was able to get into the top 30 of the last ranked season with this very exact team. Details are down in the description below, including a rental and a pace, so thanks to TSL Tang as always, and if you haven't seen the last episode, also go check it out. I've linked it down in the description below. Thanks so much as always for watching. If you do enjoy, please share your support by leaving a like on the video. I'd really appreciate it. And question of the day, inspired by us using AV Reshiram, I want to know what restricted set you think is underrated at the moment, so not just the Pokemon, but the moves and item choice on said Pokemon as well. I think right now there are still a ton of restricteds that are relatively underexplored in this format. Just some Pokemon to list include things like Dialga, Necrozma-D-M, Xerneas, Lunala, Reshiram, and even Rayquaza to an extent. So let me know yours down in the comment section below, and let's get started. Alright, kicking things off here, I couldn't even speak because my opponent's team is just so wild. And once again, it's so fun playing the tiers pre-Master Ball tier because you just run into really interesting restricted combos. Runerigus, Necrozma-D-M, Malamar, Calyrex-I, Gigalith, and Slowbro. Huh. So Trick Room is one of the main things to watch out for my opponent's end here. They've got multiple potential Trick Room users. In fact, almost every Pokemon on their team can Trick Room. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Rillaboom's actually interesting just for Fake Out into all the potential Trick Room users. We could just go with like Rillaboom and Reshiram in this one as a lead, because Reshiram is actually really solid. Offensively, it does have to worry about like max Quakes, but that's pretty much the extent of it. Gastro for Yawn pressure against Trick Room is also not bad. Like, Thundurus is definitely not coming out in this matchup. Just trying to figure out what I want to bring. Okay. I think I'm down for Rillaboom plus Reshiram, Zacian in the back, and then Gastrodon as the final one. Oh. I meant to lead with Rillaboom and Reshiram, so let's make sure we do that. Rillaboom and Reshiram, Zacian, and Gastrodon. Yeah, so I don't think Thundurus is really consistent here, especially against a Trick Room-oriented composition. Like I mentioned in yesterday's episode, you really want to bring Thundurus against Landorus T and Kyogre teams, primarily, at least in my experience. It's also interesting against Sun, right, because you can outspeed Charizard and do lots of damage to it. But, yeah, I would rather... It just doesn't make very much sense here. It's going to be Slowbro and Necrozma. Well, the interesting thing here is that both Pokemon can pressure with Trick Room. One fun thing here is that we've actually got max overgrowth with the Reshiram onto the Slowbro. I don't know if it gets a one-hit KO, though. Like, even if Necrozma Trick Room's here, it's not that scary. I'm kind of down for a Grassy Glide on a Slowbro as well as a Dynamax into a Whirlwind onto it. I guess the problem is, let's say Trick Room goes up, then you can just bring out Calyrex Ice Rider for free, and I don't exactly have a great matchup against Calyrex under Trick Room. So another play I'm thinking about is actually going for Fake Out onto Necrozma, Dynamax Reshiram here, and I could just go for max Overgrowth onto Slowbro. My only fear here is if we don't get a one-hit knockout onto it, but I guess we'll find out. Because I think in this position, Necrozma can opt to just go for a Dynamax. If it doesn't Dynamax, great, we flinch it, and then we deny them Trick Room. And ideally, Overgrowth gets a one-shot on a Slowbro. So... my question here is how specially defensive is Slowbro? And can you really take a grassy terrain boosted max overgrowth from base 140 power solar beam? And if Necrozma Dynamax is here, that's going to be a good sign for us. But yeah, they choose not to. So I really wonder if like they were trying to Trick Room with both Pokemon. Either way, though, we will prevent Trick Room on turn 1, and there's max overgrowth from our Reshiram into the Slowbro. Cool, that will be a one-hit KO. Perfect. Okay. So get that out of the way. Necrozma flinches. Doesn't really indicate to me whether or not it was Trick Rooming, though. But at least got what I wanted, which was denying them Trick Room and a free knockout on the first turn of the game. That's pretty solid. Because the thing is, now even if you bring out Calyrex Ice, yes, you can pressure Trick Room with both Pokemon, but it's a lot less scary for me because I can pressure both Pokemon with pretty good damage right now. The scary thing is like one Pokemon Trick Room and the other attacking, right? Like Flare is obviously tempting here. Both of these Pokemon can carry Weakness Policy. We got Gastron on the back, which is pretty good into Necrozma, not so much into Calyrex. Like, I'm honestly down for a Grassy Glide here and a Max Wormwind. What's the worst case here? I guess Calyrex Dynamaxing Necrozma setting up Trick Room is pretty scary. Yeah. Okay, I'm actually going to double up onto Necrozma then. Flare and High Horsepower it. I think one of these two are going to Dynamax this turn with the other clicking Trick Room, but I don't know who is going to do that. Ideally, it's Calyrex maxing here as they try to set up Trick Room with Necrozma. Cool. Okay, great. Because if Flare gets the knockout here onto Necrozma... Oh, actually, I wouldn't expect Flare to, but I think Flare plus High Horsepower should. And as long as Trick Room doesn't go up from my opponent's end in this game, we're in great shape. And they actually max guard. Okay, so they went all in this turn, basically, hoping to take no damage with Calyrex and get Trick Room up, but yeah. Oh my gosh. Flare's just a one-hit KO there. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. It's not Dynamaxed, but I'm just, you know, so used to Necrozma surviving super effective attacks, but yeah. With my opponent going all in there, like, if they attacked with Calyrex, actually they still didn't really have much of a chance, because then the Zacian comes out and just wins the game with Behemoth Blade, right? So, yeah. Cool team from my opponent's end, but this is why normally with Trick Room compositions, it's really valuable to have either a Fake Out user or a Redirection user. Often both are on Trick Room teams, because here my opponent just had no safe way to actually guarantee Trick Room going up, right? So you have a lot of slow Pokemon, so that already indicates that you clearly want to play towards Trick Room, but where can you really go from there? So Malamar comes out. I'm down to honestly just double up onto Malamar here. Flare and Glide, mainly because Zacian is just going to demolish Calyrex from this position. And even if Malamar protects, like, I don't really care. Yeah, the Zacian, or sorry, the Calyrex would get maybe a Max Quake off into Reshiram, or maybe a Hailstorm off, but they're gonna opt not to protect there. So that's just 3 KOs from Reshiram in 3 turns. Yeah, and there's Hailstorm finally, but now Zacian just comes out. So cool team for my opponent, but yeah, I think like this game highlights why often teams that rely on slower Pokemon, especially those that you know, want to take advantage of Trick Room. Those teams will often have a Fake Out user or a Redirection user, often both actually, right? So that's why Amoonguss and Indeedee are really common with these compositions. That's why Pokemon like, and it's Life Orb Calyrex, very interesting, okay. Yeah, so like Amoonguss and Indeedee, for example, for Redirection. From Fake Out, you know, Incin is always just a decent start. Although, the cool thing about Reshiram here is it actually had a pretty favorable matchup into almost anything like a Trick Room, because I could Flare into the Necrozma, I could Flare into Calyrex, I could Overgrowth into the Slowbro. The tricky thing about Slowbro, though, is I would actually need to switch Incin out into Rillaboom to set up the grassy terrain, which is why this lead ended up working out really well for us, but now we can just bring out Zacian. Even if Trick Room went up in this game, I think it would have been okay, mainly because Gastrodon can tank an attack and then get a Yawn off. The problem is that the Reshiram doesn't have Protect, and so like as soon as Trick Room goes up, Reshiram's in kind of an awkward spot where I either just give it up or maybe like sacrifice it and switch something else in, and Zacian under Trick Room is obviously just kind of an abysmal matchup. So yeah, now we can just Blade and Earth Power, and that should just be a KO. So we definitely have gone up against a lot of cool restricted duos here in pre-Master Ball tier this ranked season, but it also highlights why some of these, you know, more niche restricted pairs can be really difficult to use and execute because they just share so many weaknesses, right? Here with Calyrex and Necrozma, you're really, really weak into fire. And so, for example, Charizard, which is very common in the format right now, not exactly the most favorable matchup. And my opponent's team did have Gigalith, so that's actually one way around the fire types. And so them leading Gigalith actually would have been really interesting, although Rillaboom pressured Gigalith with decent damage with Grassy Glide. But yeah, that was a cool team for my opponent, so let's keep things going. Turns out we can actually check their team, so I am very curious. It was a defensive Slowbro here with Trick Room, Yawn, Scald, and Heal Pulse. Very cool. Focus Sash, Runerigus. This actually may have been their best bet to get Trick Room up then, just because you at least, like I would need to double up onto this to actually, you know, make sure Trick Room doesn't go up. It was Policy Necrozma, there's the Trick Room, no Protect on it, so that makes sense. Roselli Berry Malamar with Baton Pass, that's really neat. Life Orb Calyrex Ice Rider, this one did not have Trick Room. And then Wide Guard Protect Stone Edge Body Press Gigalith with Pasho Berry, very cool. So it's interesting because ultimately there was only just Necrozma. I mean, there were 3 Trick Room users. This is one of the other interesting things. Like, it can be valuable to have multiple Trick Room users, but sometimes giving up one of these so that you have a more support-oriented Pokemon that can help you set up that Trick Room can be more valuable, right? But I think Runerigus actually might have been my opponent's best bet to getting Trick Room up in this game, because you do have the Focus Sash, and to be honest, I'm not sure I would have really covered for that. And I can't click Fake Out into it either, so that's an adjustment my opponent could potentially make if we were to, say, run it back with these teams. But yeah, let's keep things going. Alright, with that, we are back in Master Ball tier, and for the first game in Master Ball tier, it's the Yveltal Zacian team with another Slowbro. If you had to ask me what the odds of fighting 2 Slowbros in a row are, I would have said essentially 0%. So, that is really fascinating. It's funny, I was like, oh, I want to use this Reshiram team, show off how good it can be against some of the more meta teams right now, but we've gone up against very non-meta teams, which is always fun as a viewer. But I do want to highlight how good Reshiram can be against, just the classic Groudon stuff running around at the moment. So it's Yveltal, Slowbro, Garchomp. Garchomp's actually very scary for Reshiram, right? Like, both Ground and Dragon type attacks are a pretty big issue for me to run into. I think I'm down for just a Grim plus Reshiram lead, Zacian in the back. Thundurus actually would not be a terrible max option here because it's got a decent matchup into Yveltal, Slowbro, Rillaboom, and Incin. And Garchomp, if you're not going for like Stone Edge or Max Rockfall, isn't really that scary either. So go with those, and I think I like Gastro as the final one just because it can yawn and it can take an attack from Yveltal, Zacian, and Garchomp. And those are like the heavy hitters for my opponents then. So let's see. I think the main thing here is who's going to Dynamax from their end. Yveltal and Garchomp are the most obvious ones, with Garchomp actually, I think, being the scariest threat. But if we get a Reflect Up and then switch Reshiram out as they Quake me and go ahead and like Gastrodon, it's not that scary. It's going to be Garchomp and Yveltal, which is interesting. Okay. The alternative is just to Reflect plus Max Wormwind turn 1, but my fear is that, like, they just Dynamax Garchomp, and I take too much damage from that. So, turn 1... like I mentioned, I think with this team it's really valuable if you can stall out your opponent's Dynamax. So if I can Reflect here and then switch Reshiram out into Gastro, and basically hope that they spend a couple of turns Dynamax with Garchomp, and we stall it out, then it's really good. The problem here is that Garchomp does get access to Swords Dance. So one play my opponent could make is just go for a Swords Dance immediately. Then we'd actually be in some pretty big trouble, especially because right now with Grimmsnarl, Thunder Wave doesn't actually work on either of my opponent's Pokemon, with Yveltal being Dark type, thus being immune to Prankster attacks, and then Garchomp being Ground type, thus being immune to Electric type attacks. So let's see. Okay, they are Dynamaxing. That's already good. Like, regardless of who's Dynamaxing here, ideally it's Garchomp, and the whole idea of leading Reshiram here is to bait the Garchomp Dynamax. Excellent, excellent. Okay. Now, I will have to play through a couple of turns of it, getting special defense boosts, and so, especially if you're like AV Garchomp, or Policy Garchomp, I want to respect both of those. I think Policy Garchomp's so slim, but you never know. The other nice thing is now this just sets up Zacian, and Zacian can stall out the Substitute, can stall out the Dynamax incredibly effectively thanks to Substitute. So there's Quake into Gastro, perfect. We take just over 50%, 105 damage to be exact, so if Yveltal did not target that slot, after leftovers, I can take another Max Quake potentially, depending on the damage roll. And they're Life Orbed. Okay, perfect. And it's just Snarl. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so now I definitely can't take another Max move on the Gastro, but that's fine. This next turn, it'd be fine to just Light Screen. I could actually just Spirit Break into the Yveltal, which would actually do a ton of damage. That's the option I'm leaning towards right now. Also, like, Gastrodon protecting here is, like, seemingly obvious, so my opponent might double up onto the Grimmsnarl instead. Light Screen's only really valuable against Yveltal here. So, and it's not even that helpful. Like, I'm actually down to just go for a Spirit Break here. And normally I would protect Gastrodon here, but Gastrodon's not even providing me with too much right now, so I'm down to just get an Ice Beam off into Garchomp, because then it's just in Behemoth Blade KO range. I think my opponent's probably going to target the Garchomp. Or sorry, target the Gastro with Garchomp, but I'm fine sacrificing it here because it's a free switch into Zacian. And it also means Grimmsnarl gets to hang around for a little bit longer, and these Spirit Breaks are actually super, super nice. So, like, I didn't want to protect Gastro, have my opponent double up onto Grimmsnarl, and then pressure me with the double knockout the subsequent turn. I'd rather just give up something for free to get something that pressures my opponent a little bit more damage-wise right now. They're just going to Oblivion Wing. Cool. So let's think about what my opponent's going to have in the back in this endgame, right? We've got him Reflect Up. They're going to have a Zacian. That's totally okay for me to go up against, especially because I've gotten the Reflect Up, and I've got my own Zacian, and Reshiram can obviously just one-shot it. My only question here is whether or not a Behemoth Blade actually one-shots Garchomp from the range that it's at. Just don't want to count on them being like having some bulk and then having them survive. So I'm down to go into Zacian first, and then this is where us having Substitute is really, really nice. I don't know. If Behemoth Blade is just a KO on a Garchomp here, like, I'm just afraid of Garchomp being bulky enough to survive. And, like, actually having some HP or defense investment. Instant being my opponent's last Pokemon also makes some sense. Like, here I'm down to Spirit Breaking a Garchomp to get some more chip onto it, sub with the Zacian, and then just Blade Garchomp next turn. Yveltal into Incin right now makes some sense to me as well. But if you do that... Okay, yep, there's a switch. Okay, they go into Rillaboom, that's fine. Which means if it's Rillaboom and Zacian in the back, right, like you can see how now we're really positioned for a late game Reshiram sweep. Okay, so there's sub. The only downside is Garchomp has gotten a bunch of these special defense boosts, but don't really think that's too much of a big deal right now. Sub there over going for Protect, just because if they end up targeting the Grimmsnarl, I mean, the odds of them targeting Grim there, I guess, are so unlikely, but if, in the off chance they were to, and we get a free sub up, it actually probably would just allow us to win the game immediately. The other interesting thing is now by bringing out the Rillaboom, if your Garchomp is indeed running Earthquake, the damage output from that is reduced. Yeah, I like think Grimmsnarl's contributions offensively to this core is actually so essential for this team. Like yesterday, just having Fairy super effective damage into all of these Pokemon, like Garchomp, like Yveltal, is honestly really, really nice. Also, if I had protected last turn, then my opponent could bring the Rillaboom out and then just go for a Fake Out plus an attack onto Zacian this turn, right? So, feeling pretty good. Reflect is giving us a lot of mileage. We've effectively stalled out my opponent's Dynamax, and we haven't lost too many resources quite yet. Here, I'm down to just go for another Spirit Break onto Garchomp and Protect with the Zacian. That'll heal us up a considerable amount as well. And even if they end up doubling onto Grimmsnarl, I really don't care. I'm actually just looking for the free switch into Reshiram. And I think if they give me the switch into Reshiram, they're going to be in even more trouble right now. Protect actually goes off into Grimm, so that's a nice play. Okay, and they read into it, double up. Stomping also comes out there, so that makes sense, but fine by me. Now we have a relatively free Behemoth Blade into the Garchomp slot. Garchomp, of course, could choose to Protect here, but I don't think Rillaboom really scares me that much here anyway. Normally I'd be a little bit cautious about hard switching, but right now I really want to put on the pressure, especially because I've put myself in a position where both of my Pokemon are looking mighty strong. So I'm down to just go for Behemoth Blade on a Garchomp, switch Grimmsnarl out into Reshiram. Even if Garchomp protects, the best my opponent's Rillaboom can do is a high horsepower. Actually, they could have Drum Beating. That's a pretty niche move, but for speed control here, it'd actually be pretty valuable. That being said, though, like, given that I've stalled out my opponent's Dynamax, I still have Reflect up, and I've still got Dynamax on Reshiram. Like, our late game with Reshiram is looking really, really powerful right now. So, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if Garchomp protects here, but I'm still going to go for the safe target to make sure we get Reshiram in safely. Okay, and they don't protect. Perfect. You can just see how valuable screens are with this team, by the way. Like, we set up the screens and then just put Reshiram in a position where it's, like, so difficult to knock out once we stall out their Dynamax. What is really important, though, is not Dynamaxing Reshiram on turn 1, because we're going to lose that trade-off every time, right? Where they're faster, they've got Max Quake, and the Yveltal had Snarl. So, high horsepower is going to come out. Yeah, it goes into Zacian, but with Grassy Terrain, with Reflect being up right now, it's not too scary. And this is where Sub is also nice, because I can also, like, try to stall out my opponent's, damage output from Glide. Or, sorry, Grassy Terrain, I should say. Okay, Zacian comes out for them, no problem here. Rillaboom at best has high horsepower in a Reshiram. I'm content to just Dynamax, Flare into Zacian, and protect this turn. Yeah. I don't care if they go for the obvious protect on Zacian, because right now they just can't deal with the Reshiram really well. And then if they protect Zacian this turn, the next turn I'm just going to pivot my Zacian out in a Grimmsnarl, sacrifice it, and then just flare their Zacian slot again. To which then they could actually pivot their Zacian out into Yveltal. That'll make things interesting. But Reflect was just so good for us throughout the course of this game. But it's still not over yet. I think my opponent could definitely still pull off a win. And I also wonder if they were AV Rillaboom, especially with that special defense boost from Max Quick earlier, I'm actually not sure a Max Flare would have KO'd it anyway. And even if we could guarantee the knockout, I guess it is worth it to take it if we're confident Zacian's protecting here. Yeah, they are. But I'm still fine with that, right? Like, I don't think it's too much of an issue. Okay. The other interesting thing would have been... So now it's also like we set up the sun, right? Meaning that my fire-type attacks do more damage, which is really nice from Yveltal. Sorry, from Reshiram. Because there's nothing that can switch it into a flare right now. Okay, they horsepower into Zacian. Perfect. Grassy Train's giving us a lot of mileage right now as well. And we do confirm they're faster, which is good to know. Okay. This turn is interesting, because I still have 2 turns of Reflect. It's the last one of Grassy Train. Flare onto Zacian for sure. I just want to be aware of them switching Zacian potentially out into Yveltal. Yeah, if they switch Zacian out into Yveltal, like I want to switch my Zacian out into Grim right now, right? Could also just flare Rillaboom, but I'm down to target the Zacian slot and switch out here. I think a big question I have here in this end game, okay, and they're not switching out, which I think is a really good sign. If their Zacian's not going for a sub here or a double protect, it should just be game over. Perfect, just a blade. Excellent. Yeah, the one play I was worried about was them conserving their Zacian, because that late game can be a little bit scary against both my Reshiram and Zacian, just because it's faster than my Zacian, and against Reshiram, you won't KO me, but Reflect's about to wear off, so maybe you can 2-hit knockout it with something like a Play Rough. But now this is perfect, right? I KO the Zacian, I still have one more turn of Dynamax left with the Reshiram, and now Yveltal just comes out. But my Zacian can just Behemoth Blade the Yveltal with no problem. And high horsepower there. I mean, considerable amount of damage, right? 77, I think. But just with Reflect, it's not very much right now. And now we bring out Zacian. So it's interesting because Landorus T is a really scary Pokemon to deal with, and that Pokemon's a little bit more meta. Garchomp, not exactly a very common Pokemon in the format, but definitely a pretty big issue for both Zacian and Reshiram, but that's why the team is constructed in a way where, okay, if you can get them to stall out their Dynamax, that's really good. Thundurus is good for the Landorus team matchup, and then Gastrodon in particular can be decent into Garchomp, although in this game we had to sacrifice it more than anything, so... Yep, I'm just going to Flare into Rillaboom now, and Blade into the Yveltal slot. Pretty sure +1 Blade always KOs Yveltal from that range, but I guess I'm not 100% confident. I would be shocked if it survived, though. Like, Yveltal without being at full HP and without being Dynamax is just... It can be really underwhelming. Cool, so there's the KO, and Flare and Sun here should also just get the KO onto Rillaboom, right? Excellent. Nice. So this was great. I mean, like, we had a game plan, we basically executed it to perfection. Trying to think if there are any turns where I could have maybe improved my play, because, you know, even despite the win, you can always try to see where you can improve in. Turn 1 is scary, though, right? Because if they actually have Swords Dance on Garchomp, I think this matchup is actually so terrible. So then it's like... Let's say I were playing a best of 3 and my opponent revealed Swords Dance, then in a best of 3 I would consider just Dynamaxing and then attacking the Garchomp turn 1. But in a best of 1, I just never feel confident in that, and fortunately my opponent did Dynamax, and I don't think... I mean, Garchomp isn't that common to begin with, so I don't know how many like Garchomp sets are running Swords Dance versus aren't running Swords Dance, but Life Orb as a max option certainly makes sense, so that trade-off ended up paying off. But yeah, if they had Swords Dance, they were giving my turn 1 play, I guess then I'd actually probably have to Dynamax, Gastro, and Hailstorm Garchomp just to deal with it. So that's actually a potential answer. But then they could Snarl and Max Quake me, so I probably don't even KO with Hailstorm. But then I go to get Zacian and it can be Behemoth Blade, so I guess it wouldn't be necessarily the end of the world, but the game certainly would have been a lot tougher. But Reshiram continues its impressive streak here, so let's look for one more. Third game here, and we do get a Groudon, but there's a Falinks, Calyrex-I, Indeedee, Venusaur. These teams are awesome. I love it. Reshiram's amazing here. But I have to worry about Sleep Powder from Venu. Ugh. Sleep Powder from Venu is actually a really big problem here. I don't know what my best lead is here. Grim? I mean, I'm definitely bringing Grim, Zacian, Reshiram. I don't think Thundurus is amazing here. There's also like 4 potential Sash users. I guess 5 if you consider Falinks as well. It should probably be Rillaboom because it's very good offensively in a Groudon, Indeedee, and the Calyrex. So like I'm thinking Grim, Zacian lead, Reshiram, and Rillaboom. The idea behind the Zacian lead is if they lead Venu, I can T-Wave into Substitute turn 1, and that covers for both Dynamax Venu on turn 1 as well as Dynamax Venu on turn 1 as well as them trying to just Sleep Powder me immediately. So I don't know. This one's a little bit interesting. Groudon Calyrex, you know, is a duo that we tried out a little bit in the beginning of the format, which I thought was cool. It's Indeedee and Calyrex. Okay. I mean, Light Screen into Behemoth Blade here is decently powerful, although I guess I have to worry about Will-O-Wisp from the Calyrex. Okay. Yeah, Will-O-Wisp would be kind of annoying here. They get Dynamax Helping Hand, Max Ghost, or Max Quake as well. Okay, your Psychic Seed. I mean, are you gonna Dynamax either of the Mons here? Light Screen and Protect is the play I'm angling for here. I think it's just relatively low risk. Scouts out for what they want to do on turn 1, so it gives me some information on their movesets. Can bait out a potential max out of Calyrex, although I think that's highly unlikely on turn 1. But if they go for it, then they're going to be in pretty bad shape here. But either way, it's just to kind of scout out for the general vibe, right? Are they going to play towards like Helping Hand? Wow, Calyrex switches into Groudon? Into Venu, okay. Now this is interesting. It's frustrating because I actually could have set up a substitute there, but I don't mind going for this play. Indeedee just protects. In my opinion, the most likely play for my opponent to make next turn is Sleep Powder into Zacian and then switch out the Indeedee out into Groudon. Which would be interesting. I'm down to Spirit Break Venu. They could also go Indeedee out into Groudon. And then Max Flare. So you know what I'm actually going to do? I'm going to T-Wave into Venu because I changed the terrain this way and then go into Rillaboom. So that way I get rid of the Psychic terrain, allowing me to get my Prankster attack off. Paralyzing Venusaur is really important in this game because otherwise in Sun it can outspeed everything. And I don't need to Reflect right now because there are no physical attackers on the field and I don't think Grim's really at risk of fainting. I don't think a Helping Hand Sludge Bomb even gets the KO here. And they've Dynamax. Okay, cool. Indeedee didn't switch out though, which is interesting. It could just be a Follow Me, right? Follow Me into Quake. Follow Me into Vine Lash on Grim would actually be pretty scary. Or, I was saying how Grim was safe here, but like Helping Hand Vine Lash would actually get rid of my Grim. Let's see what they opted for. I feel like you gotta be targeting Zacian though with this play, right? We missed Thunderwave, okay. Yeah, they went for Quake. Okay, that's fine. A little bit annoying to miss T-Wave, but it doesn't really matter right now in the context of this early game, so it's fine. Now, though, my opponent can just Vine Lash into the Grimmsnarl slot, and that's scary, and I don't have any counterplay to that, really. That was a nice play, though. I like that a lot. I still would rather Thunderwave here because there's presumably a Groudon in the back. It means I don't get Reflect up, but I don't think Reflect is that essential here anyway. And I'll just Grassy Glide into Indeedee. If I were them, I would Helping Hand Vine Lash into the Grimmsnarl slot. So if I had hit that T-Wave last turn, what would I have done? Just set up a Reflect? So it wouldn't have made too much of a difference, honestly. Okay, Indeedee switches out, which makes sense. Into Groudon. Okay. Works for me. I mean, you're eating up a Grassy Glide here, and if Thunderwave connects, like, then I can put either Reshiram or Zacian in a really good spot. Oh, interesting. They're max guarding, actually. Okay. I kind of get the idea behind max guarding there, because now you have, like, 2 scarier Pokemon on the field offensively, right? We've seen Quake, Guard. I would guess that's coming from Sleep Powder, Overgrowth, and then... Do you not have Weather Ball? That could be the case. I could just glide into Groudon, but Groudon could switch back out into Indeedee right now, which I think... certainly makes sense. Like, Groudon out into Indeedee and then just Vine Lash out into Grim can be a pretty powerful play for them right now. Ooh, I could switch in Reshiram actually. That takes Vine Lash really well, to be honest. Okay, I'm down for that. Normally I'd be a little bit hesitant here, but because Grassy Terrain is up as well, I think it's fine to go for it. And I'll just glide into the Groudon slot again. Like, even if you switch in Indeedee, that's fine, right? Because, yeah, I don't get the priority glide anymore, but it's still some damage onto it, and it breaks a potential sash. Although, I don't think it'll be sashed here. We didn't see a Psychic Seed to start off the game, though, right? So... okay. Missing that T-Wave actually makes this a lot trickier, though, because if I had hit that, then, like, you know, it sets up Zacian and Reshiram for a nicer endgame. But now the thing is, I can't Dynamax Reshiram confidently, because they could always just go for a Quake onto it. Or, sorry, Sleep Powder onto it. Reshiram took 9 damage from that, by the way. I was worried about, like, taking chip damage, but we'll literally heal up from the, well, actually, Grassy Terrain isn't up right now, so I'll have to reset that, but yeah, that's fine. So Reshiram is going to take some Vine Lash damage. Like I said, yeah, I think Sleep Powder is the main thing to be wary of right now. Sleep Powder onto Reshiram. Especially because the Rillaboom is actually out on the field for me at the moment. I wonder if there's actually ever a world in which I max the Rillaboom instead. That'd be pretty interesting. I'm down to switch Reshiram back out into Grim. Like, we're trying to stall out their Vine Lash turns right now, which is also important. I don't want to double switch, so I actually am just going to Grassy Glide Indeedee again. Yeah, having to play around Sleep Powder right now is really, really tough, but that's okay. Yeah, they're just going for it. The reason I made that switch, by the way, is because, like, Reshiram's my only real Dynamax option here, so I don't want it to just faint. And, like, if they hit the Sleep Powder, there's still 3 turns of Vine Lash, and that adds up really quickly, especially because my Rillaboom is actually out on the field right now, so I can't just, like, pivot it out for Grassy Terrain recovery, right? I'm gonna Spirit Break here. How many turns of Sun do they have left? They've got 2 left. Okay. So Spirit Break, and... I mean, they could go for a Helping Hand play here. I don't mind stalling out another turn of Vine Lash, actually. Plus, trying to wake up 1 turn quicker. So, I'm down to Protect here. It's the combination of Indeedee and Venu that makes this even trickier, because the Indeedee protects the Venu, allowing it to Sleep Powder. But, you think about what else I could have brought in this matchup, Gastrodon doesn't do anything here, so that's not the answer. Thundurus isn't really that great into my opponent's comp either. If we were Assault Vest, Thundurus, or Lumberry, yeah, I'd probably bring it, but it's neither. Okay, they just actually Earth Power into Grim, which is fine by me. And Expanding Force, yeah. Like, the key thing right now is I can't risk switching Rillaboom out into Zacian or Reshiram, right? And the thing is that my opponent's losing a fair amount of mileage by, yeah, I'm actually slightly intrigued by maxing Rillaboom, though. I actually don't think it's a terrible option in this game, just because it completely walls the Venusaur, so I can get special defense boosts as well. It's actually very interesting as an option, IMO. 2 turns of Light Screen. Spirit Break here would break a potential Sash on Venu and decrease its damage output, so I'm not a Spirit Break and Glide here. I don't think Venu has Sludge Bomb or Weather Ball based off how it's playing. Then what would it be? Sleep Powder, Earth Power, a Grass type attack, obviously, and then what's the 4th? It's Protect. That answers my question, thank you. Okay. And then they're just Expanding Force. They are faster than Rillaboom, though, but that's not, I guess, a major surprise, given that they're basically the same speed steer. This is still a really awkward game to maneuver. Okay. Do manage to wake up, which is nice. Can allow me to set up a Reflect. Sunlight Phase as well, but now you can just pivot Groudon back in, so nicely done by my opponent to conserve the weather the way they did. I should assume Groudon outspeeds the Rillaboom here. Yeah, the way they got terrain control was quite nice as well. So, like, I can Reflect with ease here. I also have to be worried about a Calyrex late game sweep. This is where if I hit that Thunder Wave earlier, then it's like I could probably even switch Rillaboom out. Let's not think about that right now. It's not really relevant. deal with all these turns of Sun again. Maybe I do switch the Rillaboom out this turn. I mean, I can't take a Precipice Blades with either of these, though. If I were my opponent, I would just Precipice Blades and then Sleep Powder into the Rillaboom slot. So I guess I could give up both Pokemon right now. Set up a Reflect. Actually, Reflect Glide here is fine, because the play, like I just mentioned, my opponent may be making. Okay, they actually switch Groudon out. Maintains weather control. Yeah, now you have two really fast things out on the field. I think that's a good play. Especially with Light Screen expiring after this turn. So Reflect, like, not really valuable, but I didn't think I'd get another like meaningful attack off here anyway. And they actually just go for Sleep Powder onto the Grim. This game has been so weird because I've never felt comfortable making the switch, and I actually might just Dynamax Rillaboom this next turn to survive and then just KO Calyrex. Because the Venusaur we know is Sleep Powder, Protect, Grass type attack, and Ground type attack. Now, there's no more Light Screen up, but I think I can take an attack from Calyrex here. And if I max and KO the Calyrex, we should just win the game, because there's no way Venusaur can beat Reshiram and Zacian in the back. And if I faint here to an Astral Barrage with Sleep Powder spam, things actually get really dicey. So, yeah, I'm actually going to max the Venu here. Or, sorry, the Rillaboom. Quake might just be better. I mean, there's no way Calyrex survives. Well, I guess they could have Will-O-Wisp. I don't think a special defense boost really contributes much here anyway. So, yeah. This was a really weird game. Like, if I had hit that Thunder Wave earlier, I would have played it out in a completely different manner, but because I missed, it means that the Venusaur in the late game can just Sleep Powder both of my main attackers. So as long as Rillaboom survives an Astral Barrage here, plus like a potential Earth Power, we should be good. I don't see it fainting, but if it does, I might have actually just lost the game from this turn, right? Especially because my opponent actually stalled out my Light Screen. Okay, I'm fairly sure we should survive unless they get a special defense drop. Wow, it is enough for a KO. Dang, well done. Well done. I didn't think we'd faint there. I also, like, I guess I never confirmed the item on Calyrex, but maybe I'm just too used to playing with the, It's also still not necessarily over, right? Like, Reshiram could still bring this back with Zacian support. I just try to respect Sleep Powder too much in this game, and it was kind of a mess. I should have just maxed Rillaboom earlier, because if I had maxed it previously, I would have been able to get special defense boosts off with it, but I didn't think I really needed to. So their play is what? Astral Barrage, Earth Power right now, probably. Yeah, it's still winnable, but it depends on whom they target. Like, I wonder if it specs Calyrex or Spell Tag, because I don't think if you don't have a special attack boosting item, that actually KOs the Rillaboom, but I might just be wrong on my damage calc assumption there. I think I want to protect Zacian here. How many turns are Sun left? There's still 3, man. Okay, I'm gonna Solar Beam Calyrex and Protect here. It might be Specs Calyrex, but I'm really not sure. And that's the thing with Calyrex, like, the whole point was to try to survive there, and I didn't end up even surviving. They do Sleep Powder, okay. I mean, does +2 Astral Barrage really KO AV Reshiram here? Let's see. I wouldn't expect it to, but if you were Specs, then maybe. 160. I feel like that's gotta be Specs, right? They're just doing way too much damage. I gotta run the calcs after this game, because both of those knockouts actually surprised me, but if you were Specs or any other special attack boosting item, that would make sense. I guess there's still a slide out in which like Calyrex is slower than Zacian for whatever reason, but... And Venus would have to miss a Sleep Powder, but Venu was a nightmare in this game, and this is why Venusaur has been one of the most threatening Pokemon in Sword and Shield, right? Ability to a great max form as well as Sleep Powder with Sun is just such a scary combo, so... Really crazy Calyrex sweep here in the end, and I don't know if I could have really played it out too differently in towards the end game. I would have needed to, like, what got really awkward for me was when I had Grim and Rillaboom out next to each other on the field, right? And so, like, missing that Sleep Powder changed everything, because if we don't miss that, then or sorry, missing the Thunder Wave, because if we hit that, then it means that I don't have to worry about you getting a Sleep Powder on Zacian before I can get an attack off, right? And this game can highlight just how oppressive like Calyrex can be, especially when you have something like Sleep Powder support. So I'm gonna pull up the damage calc because I really don't know the item on Calyrex, and I didn't think I'd actually faint to with Rillaboom or Reshiram if they weren't like a special attack boosting item. So I'm really curious. So let's take a look. So I think it was very likely that the Calyrex was spexed based off this damage calc. So if you're not choice specs here against the Reshiram set that we're running, even +2 Astral Barrage just never picks up the KO. Reshiram had about 160 HP there in that end game. So it had to be Spell Tag or choice specs. It actually could be Spell Tag here if you're Modest, for example. Since we had 160, you can see Spell Tag, even with +2, does not KO the Reshiram from that range, but if you're Modest Calyrex, which is a little bit less common just because the speed is important, so that you don't lose, like, or you at least speed tie with opposing Calyrexes, but Modest Spell Tag here does get the KO in one damage roll specifically. I think more likely Timid plus Choice Specs is what I would expect in that position, and this just goes to show the value of a item like Choice Specs, right, where not a lot of players expect it from Calyrex. So Timid plus Choice Specs here actually gets the KO almost every single time. There are only 2 damage rolls in which I can survive there. So if I had to guess, it was Timid Specs. If we look up the calc against Rillaboom, actually, turns out because of the Earth Power damage, I didn't really factor that into the calc, but if you factor an Earth Power into it, like, we had a pretty good chance of surviving. They needed a higher damage roll to actually get the knockout onto the Rillaboom, since we were at, like, mid-120s, I believe. But yeah, so you actually don't even necessarily need choice specs to get the KO there. But like I said, I am fairly confident they were specs there. Maybe it was Modest Spell Tag. That's the only other real possibility, I think. And so if it's Modest specs here, then you do just guarantee the knockout onto Rillaboom Deer, doing 169 to 199. So yeah, Specs Calyrex is like one of those sets that's so uncommon that I wouldn't really anticipate it in a position like that. But I don't think... I think if I were to max Rillaboom, I should have just done it earlier to get some special defense boosts along the way. I didn't really want to do it because I was afraid that the, Groudon would just come and outspeed me and KO me, thus wasting my Dynamax. The thing is, I could have switched out Rillaboom at multiple different points as well, but I was really nervous about my opponent just clicking Sleep Powder onto Rillaboom at any given point. That's one thing I could have done better in that game, just swap out the Rillaboom and reset the grassy terrain, so then I have these grassy glides, right? And then I can also Thunder Wave with the Grim as well. But I was like, okay, if I switch out at any point, something gets hit by a Sleep Powder, that's really, really bad, so I didn't want to risk that. But in the end, it actually punished me really heavily. And yeah, I just wasn't playing an endgame assuming Choice Sparks Calyrex at all, and Specs Calyrex. And Calyrex in general is just a Pokemon with insane comeback potential, and in the end, I didn't really get a very good Dynamax off in this game. So definitely a lot of different ways to improve in. Of course, hitting that Thunder Wave would have made the game a lot easier, but definitely, didn't play optimally kind of in that mid to end game as well. And I guess I should have considered Specs or even just Life Orb Calyrex a little bit more. I think I had too much faith in Rillaboom surviving there. And that part of the reason was because I played with AV Rillaboom so much that I always expected to take special attacks well, but obviously we're not using AV Rillaboom here, so it's a helpful calc to know. Either way, though, nice execution by my opponent. That Venusaur was a pain, and Venu plus Sun plus Specs Calyrex is a really cool combo. So I wonder if it was Spell Tag or Specs. Either way, though, not running, the usual Sash or Life Orb, I think, really intriguing. And so, yeah, that's going to be it for this one. Thanks so much, as always, for watching. Leave a like if you enjoy, and I'll catch you all soon. All right, peace.